Wonderful.
This is our first Zoom call. It's very exciting.
You know, the honor is all mine, ladies. What an honor to have you guys. Thank you for making this the first Zoom call. You guys are royalty here in Nashville. I've been here 5 months, and the mark that you've left in this town is very consequential. So it's an absolute honor to have you here, Evelyn.
Well, thank you. That's very nice of you. Are you here in Nashville or in Florida?
I am. We've been in Nashville in the Gulch since December. So we're newbies to the town that you know so well.
Where did you live before?
In Florida, in South Florida.
I lived in Coconut Grove for many years.
There you go.
And Susan lived in Key West.
Yes.
For a long time.
She sure did, ladies. So let me, first introduce you to my audience. Of course, you guys make history as the first female executives to lead a major country music label in Nashville with Asylum Records in 1998. Decades working in publicity management, and now you guys host a fantastic podcast, the Shady Ladies of Music City, where you guys just talk about all your amazing experiences. You've had some great guests like Martina McBride, role model of the Mavericks. Congratulations, ladies. You're pioneers, and it's a great honor to have you.
Thank you much. I appreciate that. Well,
absolutely.
Are you a fan of the Mavericks?
Yeah, absolutely. We love absolutely. We love Raul and his music, and we enjoyed that episode very, very much. So yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, he's talent. I think that he's one of the best singers in this town.
I think he's one of the best singers in the country. Forget the town, probably in the world. I mean, he can sing anything and sound incredible. When he did our Spanish albums, when we had him do it for Bandit Records, he ended up having to sing a lot of it. And it was amazing that he could sing anything.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah, he really.
We did a Spanish record for families called Cancionero de la Familia. And Raul was going to do it for us. And, we thought we'd have all these kids singing it too. And it was, old Spanish songs from all the different cultures. We went to every Spanish culture. I can see you, Evelyn. We went to every Spanish culture and got songs. So we couldn't find any children to sing it. So Raul had to sing the whole thing.
With his family.
Yeah, that's a great story.
His sister sang also.
That's a great story. Absolutely. I have to tell you though, Evelyn, because you say, in the world, I have to tell you, the talent that in Nashville is unlike anything I've ever seen in my life. I've traveled all over. I've seen quite a few things. It seems like everybody here is at another level. I've never seen anything like it, ladies.
That's kind of true. Sometimes we tend to get jaded, because everybody puts country music down so much. But when you really think about, the singers and the songwriters and the musicians and, the incredible diversity, even though there's not a lot of diversity right now in the music, I'm talking about musically, there used to be so many stylists, and I think it'll come around, but I do agree with you that the talent level in Nashville is extraordinary.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely, Evelyn. So actually let's start with let's pivot there to, one of the things that you've broken ground and that you've done is, of course, you've broken so many glass barriers for women and all that stuff. So let's start there, Evelyn. Like, where do we stand with equality in the music industry today, in April, May 2021?
Well, I'm not really that active in the music industry anymore, so I don't really know that much about what's going on. I do see that there's been a tremendous influx of people from other cities, which is really good. And there's thousands of women. I don't even know who any of them are, but, they seem to, I went to some women's organization kind of meeting about a year ago, well, before the pandemic.
Sure.
And there were probably 200 women there, and they were all young and excited and happy to be in the business. I don't know what the hell they do in the business, but there were a lot of them. And I see a lot of women now in management and a lot of executive levels that didn't exist. There was a time, when there were a lot of women in power, like Donna Hilley and Connie Bradley and Frances Preston and all of that, but it seemed to have been done in a more subtle way. Now there are just a lot of strong women kind of taking their place.
Yeah. Well, what about you, Susan? What do you think?
Working at labels, and they never were responsible for the music that came out. And that was always reserved for the men. And so the men always, and the promotion staff, which is always male, mostly, and they always pick the songs that came out. But I think you're talking about now, there's a lot of people that have moved here. I haven't really seen a lot in the Latin way of Raul or the Mavericks or anything. I haven't heard a lot of Latin music coming out of here, but I know that there's hip hop coming out of here, and I know that there is R&B coming out of here, but we just don't hear it that much.
Yeah, absolutely. Evelyn, and we were just talking about the level of talent here in Nashville. I mean, the way you guys meet, I mean, Evelyn, you were representing Randy Travis, and Susan, you were Tammy, Wynette, and all this stuff. When do you guys know, like, that there was something special, like with the talents that you guys saw? Because everyone seems to be, all things being equal, what makes the talents like stick out? What the it factor, the X factor?
The voice.
The
voice.
voice.
Tammy had a voice unlike anybody else's. She had what they call the tear in her voice. Mm-hmm. And the same with George Jones, the same with Lori Morgan. If you listen today, Carrie Underwood has an extraordinary voice. And right. Miranda Lambert also has a great voice. It's just a different type of voice. So it's mainly the voice. I don't think in country music, it has to do so much with the way that people look. And it has to do with the songs. And Nashville is definitely a city of poets. We have a lot of great writers here.
Yes.
And songwriter community is very, very strong. And it always has been. And I think that's, it's the voice in the song and how they present it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Evelyn, and, Evelyn, I'm curious about, like, what do you think about, the fact that, like, now everyone has access to every song in the world in their pocket, like in Spotify and Apple Music. Does this blow you away a little bit, Evelyn? Like the way technology is kind of like accelerating with music?
It does blow me away. And truthfully, it totally confuses me because I'm not of that generation that I understand it so much. But I think it's an amazing thing that, the entire catalog of the world almost is at your fingertips. If you know how to find it, and it's pretty easy to find apparently. I think it's a great thing. I mean, it's a different way of buying music, I guess. People don't sell as many records, but I think many more people are listening to the music than bought it to begin with. So, and everybody's getting compensated pretty much nowadays. They've kind of, smoothed out the rough edges that most record companies were terrified of.
Yeah.
Now they get to make a lot of money. They don't really have to do much.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And guys, I know you guys have talked about this incessantly, but, for my audience that may not know the classic story, the way you guys met. So Susan, let me take you there. You're representing Randy Travis and Evelyn. I'm sorry, Evelyn was representing Randy Travis, and you were Tammy Wynette. When you guys met, did you immediately know that was there like a mutual like friendship, love at first sight kind of thing? Or like, what was like that chemistry?
I met Evelyn and I thought, God, I knew that she was really smart. I knew that she was from New York, and right. I thought she was Jewish. So I thought, great, somebody Jewish here in town. Yeah. And I wanted to be friendly with her. And truthfully, I pursued the friendship.
Gotcha. What do you think, Evelyn? Were you like, why is this lady pursuing me so much?
No, I was really happy because Susan was very smart. Susan had, traveled all over the world. She had a much more similar background to me than most of the people that I met in Nashville in those days.
Sure.
It was a very, very small town then. And, even, the women that I spoke of before, that were in power positions, these were not, like well-traveled people that had really experienced a lot other than Nashville, or the United States. So Susan, was smart. She was funny. She was, brassy almost, in the sense that so many people played the shrinking violet in Nashville because it was sort of the Southern female way. And there was, Susan right in your face. So, I responded equally to her. I just, I was new in town and I hadn't, met that many people. I had worked Randy, I think the first year almost out
Right.
of New York. So I was happy to make a friend.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Love that story, guys. And let me talk a little bit about the genesis of you guys individually. Susan, of course, before becoming a music executive icon, you've always been a music fan, like to the bone. That's like your first love, Susan. Tell us about the first time you saw Bob Dylan and Joan Baez in concert, and just kind of like what do you remember feeling that day, and like how it kind of changed your soul forever.
Well, they played at a venue in Pittsburgh, which is where I was from, called the Syria Mosque, which was one of those beautiful theaters built like the Fox Theater. The Fox is in Atlanta, and I don't remember where the other Fox is, but the Syria Mosque was beautiful. And I had bought a Bob Dylan record and a Joan Baez record. And, of course, my parents were like, how can you listen to this? This guy can't sing, but, had a message. And I went to the Syria Mosque and saw them. And back then, nobody had any backdrops or anything, and there was no production. It was just Bob Dylan, and then Joan Baez came out. And it was very moving to me because of, he was singing, whatever he was singing was always very impactful. And the audience loved them. I can tell you that much. The audience loved them. And it was probably in the 60s, and the 60s was just beginning, and he was singing, the times they are changing, and hey, Mr. Tambourine Man. And well, he didn't sing that, the Byrds did. But all the songs that he sang, and it was really an impactful event, and it changed me because I had always listened to R&B, and I loved R&B, the Temptations, the Marvelettes, the Miracles, all of them. And when I heard Bob Dylan, I thought, I love this guy, even though he doesn't have a voice. He has a terrible voice. So it changed me. I think that I became part of the 60s movement when I heard Bob Dylan and Joan Baez.
Unbelievable. And you've changed the music industry. So, that's another thing that they've affected, indirectly. And Evelyn, let me ask you about this. You had a great career in New York, of course. You work with actors like Cary Grant, Betty Davis, Joan Crawford, with Cher, Diana Ross, and so on and so forth. When you came back, when you came to Nashville, and when you started working with Randy Travis, but how was that shift like, Evelyn? I mean, from that hustle and bustle and that buzz of New York and working with this types of like talents, to kind of like more mellow Nashville back then. How was that transition like for you?
I wanted that transition, which is why we, moved back. New York, I had a great 1-bedroom apartment.
Yeah.
And on the Upper West Side on 76th and West End. And to get an extra bedroom was going to cost me like another $2,000 a month,
Right.
Basically because of the realities of the rent situations there. And I'm talking about because I was only paying about $400 a month. So, to try to get, and I wanted a washer and dryer in my, own environment. I didn't want to have to schlep down to the laundromat.
Sure.
And I wanted to barbecue at my house. And so those are the things that, really made me want to leave New York. And I didn't want to move to Los Angeles. I knew a lot of people in LA, but everybody I knew were multimillionaires. And I thought, I'm just going to constantly be jealous of what everybody else has if I go to Los Angeles, because the only people I knew were celebrities and people that were making, ungodly amounts of money. And I thought Nashville could be a nice place. And so, we moved here, and it was an adjustment because in New York, everything is so fast paced. Now, my husband is basically a nicer person than I am, in terms of dealing with people. And we'd be in the supermarket, and in New York, you just kind of ignore the cashier, and it's all, very quick. You get your money, you get your stuff, and you're out.
Yeah.
But in Nashville, they talk to you, the cashiers, and they say, well, how are you? Are you having a good day? And my husband says, he said to me, you have to be nicer. You have to answer people and thank them. And, it was funny, but it was true. It was like learning to put the brakes on it, that you had to treat people differently. And I was, happy to do that. I was happy to, hit a slower pace.
Yeah, absolutely. And, we'll talk about the podcast in just a second, guys. Of course, the Shady Ladies of Music City, available wherever you listen to your podcast. It's a phenomenal podcast. But Susan, let me ask you about your writing, because you're a hell of a writer. You've talked about writing, and you've written several books. And in fact, it was during the press tour for a book that you met Liz Thies, who had a great PR company called Network Inc., and you ended up working in PR. Was it hard at all to kind of like let go of writing at that point and go, pursue a little bit of a career in PR, or like, were you like,
No, I'm
ready for it?
traumatized. I had never worked a fax machine. I had no idea how business ran. I was a writer, and I also had a popcorn stand in Key West.
Right.
Not our huge business enterprises, although we made a lot of money at the popcorn stand. So when I first got into the music business with Liz working, she was working the Benson and Hedges Blues Tour. And so she sent me to Atlanta and St. Louis to deal with all these incredible blues legends: Bobby Blue Bland, B.B. King, Albert Collins, Albert King, Ray Charles. They were all doing shows, and I was supposed to media train them, which means explain to them that they had to try to work in Benson and Hedges and whatever they said.
Right.
So, I had to media train the phenomenal keyboardist Pinetop Perkins, and I had to try to tell him to put Benson and Hedges blues in. So I was very artist oriented. That was my main thing. And so I got along great with all the artists.
Yeah. I mean, you guys are amazing people. Absolutely. Evelyn, let me ask you about when you and Susan kind of signed George Jones there for a second, and you helped him release, the Grammy, winning Cold Hard Truth. And what's the story of signing George Jones? How did you guys meet him, and then working with him and develop him to the artist that he eventually became?
Well, I originally met George, through Randy Travis, since he was, a huge fan of George's. And then through Tammy, and I'd run into George a lot, my first couple of years in Nashville. In fact, I won Publicist of the Year one year, and George presented the award to me. And basically, I talked to Nancy Jones, his wife, a lot, and they didn't want to have to pay me. They wanted me to represent them, but they didn't want to have to pay for it. Her feeling being that I was always going to say no, because George didn't like to do interviews. So why should they pay me to say no? I didn't have to do anything. And, after a couple of years of explaining that was very time consuming,
right.
They, hired me on to do the publicity. And so I represented George as a PR, agent for, I'd say, well, many years. I don't really remember how many years. And then when we took the Asylum job, that was the first thing that we wanted to do, was to sign George and to sign Tammy. And unfortunately, Tammy died, the night we took over. But, we did sign George, and we were all very happy. And in fact, he bought a boat, and he called it Evelyn's Asylum. And that was very nice of him. So it was a great relationship, and we made an absolutely phenomenal album with the Cold Hard Truth. So we were very proud of that. Unfortunately, George was in an accident, and then 9/11 happened, the week we released the album. Yeah. So we had a lot of bad things going for us, but it all worked out in the end.
Sure. Susan, let's talk to me about the podcast. It's been a huge success. People love it. Everyone is catching on, and the stories are phenomenal. How did the idea come from? Where did you sit down with Evelyn and like, were you like, Ev, like, we have so much to tell, like, this is the new medium? How did it come about?
Well, truthfully, the head of Monument Records and the manager that owns Sandbox Entertainment, Jason Owen, was a friend of mine.
Right.
I knew him from Luke Lewis, who was the head of Universal, and also had what was the name of the label he had?
Lost Highway.
What?
Lost Highway.
He had. I used to see Jason all the time at Luke and Lauren's, and he heard a lot of my stories. And when he took over Monument Records, he said to me, you know, I've always wanted you to do something. He tried to use me in a little story that CMT with Leanne Womack. That didn't work out, but he said, I want you to do a podcast, and I think maybe you and Evelyn should do it together, and you could tell your stories. So I was told, I had never listened to a podcast. So I was, you know, kind of unclear. I didn't realize there was no video, because my thing was, I don't want to be on video like we are here. So
you guys look beautiful. Thank you.
I went to Evelyn and told her that Jason wanted a podcast, and then we started working out the details. But Jason is a very creative and smart executive, and it was his idea.
Gotcha. And Evelyn, were you like on board from the first minute?
Well, you know, I considered it because over the years, you know, particularly when reality TV came along, people would say, oh, you and Susan should do a reality series. And we heard that so many times, and we, you know, always ignored it. And then the podcast thing came up, and that was attractive in terms of not having to be on video. But you know, my thing was that I didn't want to have to interview people we didn't know. I didn't want to be like a, you know, like a tour stop for people. You know, it only made sense to me if, you know, the first season, it was just me and Susan talking to each other and cackling away and laughing at our experiences. In the second season, we've interviewed people, but these are people that, you know, we've known basically for 20 or 30 years.
Sure.
So there's a real comfort level. I don't want to have to like research somebody and ask them about, you know, their life so much as, you know, if they were people that, you know, lived part of the experience with us and it was really natural, then it works for me.
Love it.
And all the people we interviewed this year, we have long relationships with.
Yeah, I love it. I love it, girls. Well, listen, you guys have been so generous with your time. I mean, we've had a blast. It's been a true honor to talk to you ladies. I mean, thank you so much for giving us the first video chat. And, you know, we're going to put the link to your podcast up. And thank you so much for your time, guys.
Well, thank you so much. We appreciate it.
Absolutely. Take care, ladies.
We enjoyed it.
Thank you, Evelyn. Thank you, Susan.
Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.